The corpse can also be eaten, don't waste it. The beginning of the story is a very gruesome scene. On the ground, the blood of the corpse of a man seeps through, surrounded by green and yellow-headed figures devouring it. Finally, there is food. The man's eyes lie beneath the floor, bulging out. Streams of blood trace lines across his eyes. Pain, too much pain, in those agonized eyes, a silhouette of a woman emerges. The girl leaning on the man's breath is Celina. Celina looks cunning and says, "I told him to open the door. Remember to share some of the loot with me." The dead body is in agony and full of regret. This is Alex, our main character. Alex's hand is handed over to Celina. Alex resents thinking he was too naive. "If there is a next life, you will pay they back 100-fold for what you did to me today." The scene shifts, and Alex suddenly wakes up, sweating and panting. Ha ha ha. Perhaps God felt pity for Alex, so he sent him back to the past before the apocalypse. Alex wonders what's going on. Wasn't he killed by the neighbors? Alex opens his phone to check the calendar, and it's November 12th. There's still 1 month until the apocalypse. Alex happily stands by the railing, enjoying the warm rays of sunlight. After days surrounded by an icy barrier, I'm alive again, he thinks. In 1 more month, Earth will be affected by the explosion of a supernova. The global temperature will drop to -60 to 70 degrees, and a prolonged snowstorm will lead to the extinction of entire species, including humans. Alex, frustrated, thinks about the difficulty of obtaining supplies, relying on relationships with supermarket managers. However, the result is that a mob of desperate creatures, wolves at heart, loots and robs them, even resorting to violence for food. Alex hastily devises a plan to avoid the fate of his previous life. The urgent task now is to ensure safety, accumulate enough supplies to survive the apocalypse, and then seek revenge on those scavengers. Alex carefully considers food, entertainment, and, importantly, perfect weapons to fend off attackers. Suddenly, a streak of green flashes across Alex's eyes. He squints at the strange thing that just flew into his eyes, and suddenly, Alex is transported into a different dimension. Alex hovers in the air unexpectedly. This is a different dimension where he can store resources limitlessly. Alex's sly and cunning demeanor gradually emerges. If he can seize the opportunity to clear out the supermarket, he won't have to worry about storage for 10 lifetimes. The plan is set, and Alex's bloodthirsty appetite surfaces. With only 1 month left until the apocalypse, Alex is eager to devour all the delicious food before it's too late. The dazzling sunlight shines on the towering skyscrapers. "Hello, all the delicacies I've ordered are ready," Alex muses. Alex feasts as if he's been starving for days, his hands and mouth working hastily. The serving staff is scared, wondering where this newly rich person came from. Eat quickly, the apocalypse is near. Afterward, it won't be as easy to find food, Alex thinks, tears of happiness flowing. After devouring a mountain of food, Alex, with a bloated stomach, heads out. The restaurant staff congratulates him on surpassing 100,000 in his bill and hands him a VIP card, welcoming him back. A green-haired girl with a fit body, Celina's close friend, the Nin, waves at Celina, saying how lucky she is to encounter a rich guy. Celina is surprised, thinking that he always pretended before, but now they coincidentally meet. She feels embarrassed. Alex, seeing Celina, darkens his face. Still the same, pretending to be innocent and pitiful. "But in the end, you're the one who betrayed me, wanting to chop my ribs for soup," Alex sneers, displaying a disdainful black card. "I want to go to the supermarket to buy some supplies," he says, silently determined not to let her die too easily. "Just perfect, I was planning to go shopping too, convenient," Liney adds. "We can help you organize the items, we're neighbors, after all, we should help each other." In the supermarket, seeing Alex buying so much, Celina asks how many people he plans to feed. Liney, noticing Alex's focus on snacks, questions if he's planning a camping trip. "Even the rich don't eat much of this stuff," Alex replied. "The weather is so unpredictable. If someday the end of the world comes, then why should I hold on to principles to live through the day?" Nella was taken aback by this. "If you don't want to talk about it, then fine. Today we're helping you so much," she said. Later on, you have to invite me to dinner. Alex, reluctant, tried to find a temporary excuse. I've been quite busy lately, I don't have much free time. Let's talk about it next month, Liney interjected wearily. A big man like you, with so much money, unexpectedly stingy, Nella said hesitantly, nudging Liney. Liney, you're tired, don't pay attention to what I just said, okay? We're all good friends, reminding each other for the sake of our friendship, she continued. Seeing this, Liney scratched his head and laughed. Right, I talk faster than I think. Alex, don't take it to heart, Nella said quickly, speaking up for Liney. Alex is good man, he definitely won't pay attention. After buying the special stuff, let's hurry home. Alex turned his head back, his eyes sparkling with a mischievous grin. Nella and Liney pushed forward a bunch of food, panting heavily. Meanwhile, Alex, the young man, calmly walked ahead to swipe his card. Mrs. Lambda, their neighbor, was carrying the little boy and noticed Alex buying so much food. Mrs. Lambda's greedy nature surfaced as she said, Alex, why did you buy so much? Can you share some with me? Hearing this, Alex's expression darkened. Mrs. Lambda's mischievous grandson tried to grab a chocolate bar from Alex's shopping bag. Alex quickly snatched it back, causing the boy to pretend to cry loudly. Seeing her grandson being denied the chocolate, Mrs. Lambda became extremely angry and yelled, You're a bad person. Give the chocolate back, or I'll kill you. Ignoring her, Alex, along with Nella and Liney, entered the elevator. Back at Alex's home, Nella leaned into the doorway, reminding him, Don't forget to invite us for dinner. Alex casually responded, Yeah, I'll definitely invite you next time. He closed the door with a thud, holding a list of items to prepare. He then opened a dimensional space to store the provisions, prioritizing food confirmation and medicine retrieval. Heating products required an additional insulating layer for the furnace. Inside, he constructed an ironclad security system. The remaining issue was to consider preparing hot and cold weapons for defense. Alex sat down on the sofa, contemplating. The assets at hand, having money in hand would solve everything. Early the next morning, at Alex's house, he went to the bank to borrow money and then approached the underworld for a loan. Now, he had the funds to construct a safe room. He headed to the security company. The company he visited was one of the most reputable in the world. In a previous life, some wealthy individuals had used this company to build a safe room sufficient for surviving the apocalypse for a period of time. Suddenly, the director of Bow & Company appeared. Hello, I'm Hogarth, the director of operations. May I ask what you need us to do? Alex stood up and shook hands with the director. I need you to build the safest room for me, capable of withstanding doomsday, he said. Upon hearing this, Director Hogarth's eyes lit up. Our Bow & Company is top-notch in the world, and we can certainly meet any of your needs. The prices for the items on the list can be tailored to your preference. Alex solemnly examined the contract in his hand. The contract outlined several items, reinforcing the room with a 200 mm thick alloy to replace the house's walls and ceiling, converting the balcony into bulletproof glass resistant to extreme temperatures, installing a synchronized ventilation system, and implementing air filtration to prevent any harmful gases from infiltrating the surveillance system. Additionally, install 360-degree cameras with no blind spots both inside and outside the room. The room should be able to trigger instant alerts. Its walls should be reinforced with thick, sturdy anti-theft metal, similar to the vault door of a bank, making it difficult to open even with small explosive devices. After reading through the list, Alex handed it back to Hogarth, who seemed to understand the customer's mindset and added, although this room is not even 120 square meters on the 24th floor, with these modifications, it can easily be equipped with additional weapons. This room itself is a fortress. Alex was surprised. Hogarth had previously been a mercenary overseas, so he had a thorough understanding of military tactics. Upon hearing this, Alex had a sudden idea. Do you have a way to acquire firearms? He asked Hogarth. Hogarth replied, Alex, in principle, we don't allow personal armaments. Have you encountered any dangerous enemies? Alex scratched his head and explained, yes, I've offended some dangerous people. They are ruthless, and they have guns. Alex's face darkened, and he asked Hogarth, I'm spending over $8 million on this safe room project. can you help me acquire a shotgun for self-defense? It shouldn't be too difficult, right? Hogarth closed his eyes, smiled, and replied, of course, it's possible. But I can't just provide firearms to someone without a clear background. Then he stood up, looked at Alex, and responded, within the next 2 weeks, we can complete the renovation of the safe room for you. During this time, if there's any news about acquiring a gun, I'll inform you. Alex felt somewhat reassured and replied, that's fine, I'll wait for your update. Alex considered his next step, planning to go to the hunting club. He wanted to see if it was a source of important firearms. Alex purchased various hunting weapons such as bows and arrows in bulk. He had a hunting license, so even if the police asked, he had a legitimate reason to answer. Returning to his car and heading back to the apartment building, Alex noticed Uncle Andrew shouting. No entry. It turned out to be trucks delivering food for Alex. Uncle Andrew continued, saying that bringing in so much food surely required the landlord's permission. I didn't allow anyone to enter without permission, he said. Approaching closer, Alex raised his hand and said, Uncle Andrew, this is all food for my nephew. Let them in. Uncle Andrew, surprised, asked, what are you eating that requires so many trucks to deliver? Those nearby overheard Alex's explanation and started discussing. There must be at least enough food here for thousands of people. Someone in the crowd remarked. That's the food entrance of the 5-star hotel, very grand. Alex truly is a wealthy guy. Nella stood amidst the crowd, overhearing Alex's words. She was now certain that Truong Dinh was indeed not lacking in wealth. She felt a bit anxious and then entertained a dark thought, wondering if he truly was from a wealthy family. In that case, I might as well deceive him into giving me everything he has, she thought to herself. Alex raised his arm and signaled to the driver, let's go to the warehouse first. I've already spoken with the manager over there. Nella felt awkward, touching her head and blinking her eyes. Alex sensed her feigned innocence, his face showing a hint of nausea before he composed himself. He continued to pretend to deceive her, waiting for the moment when she realized the truth, intending to personally lead her into hell. Then he walked up to his house, opened the door, and entered. A food delivery person greeted him with a smile, saying, Alex, 500 tables of wine have been delivered. Enjoy your meal. Alex replied, thank you, but today everyone has worked hard, so let me check something first. He then hurried to a large pharmaceutical company and met with their director. I need a large quantity of essential and effective medication, he stated. I'll pay double the market price, ensuring you won't lose out, Alex assured. After some negotiation, he managed to purchase a large quantity of medication. Later, he entered the supermarket warehouse, observing the bustling aisles, silently contemplating, all the food, daily necessities, and tools needed for life are here. It could sustain 1 million people without issue. He had to carefully plan to acquire all the supplies in a discreet manner. Upon Alex's return, Alex passed by, coincidentally encountering Nella and Chugab. Chugab held 2 movie tickets and said to Nella, Nella, are you free this weekend? I have tickets for a movie, or we could go together. Nella, stroking her hair, thanked Chugab but declined, citing a prior engagement. Chugab noticed Alex passing by and smirked contemptuously. He angrily turned to Alex and reprimanded him, you're not behaving properly at all. A big man like you letting a woman carry groceries? His actions caught Nella off guard, but she pretended to smile. Chugab, becoming more agitated, pointed at her and said to Alex, today, Nella said she's going to work because she claims to have a backache. If this happens again, please don't bother her anymore. Nella struggled to respond to Chugab, feeling awkward and embarrassed. In reality, my health is fine, Nella replied. Seeing Chugab's statement, Alex glanced at Nella with a bullet-shaped gaze, immediately understanding that this woman was boasting. Perhaps she wanted to flaunt that she and Alex were very close so that everyone would think they were dating. Chugab pointed at Alex again and ordered him to quickly give $500 to Nella for a health checkup. Alex didn't let him speak further. With a serious expression, he said that Nella volunteered to help him move things. He didn't ask for it and won't be threatened or mocked. Moreover, what kind of man are you, pointing fingers in front of me? Alex continued. After speaking, he turned and walked away. Chugab seemed intimidated, stepping back nervously to answer, I was just negotiating with him. There's no need to make a scene. Then he turned to Nella and advised her to stay away from Alex, as he wasn't a good person. Nella held onto her glass water, watching Alex's departing figure, then pondered to herself. In the past few days, Alex seems to have changed into a different person. He doesn't initiate conversations with me anymore or send me goodnight texts. There must be some problem. The next day, at the 5-star hotel, Alex stepped out of the bathroom in the evening. Alex had just seen a message from Nella, feeling that recently he had been acting a bit strange, both starting to collect items and rearranging his room. Was something happening recently? Alex, wiping his wet hair, held his phone, pondering. Nella's message seemed to be starting to suspect something. Nella continued, it seems like we haven't been in touch much lately. I feel lonely. Alex sat up on the bed, showing no interest in her message. Nella, on the other end, felt annoyed. This darn Alex, has he gone crazy recently? I reached out to him, and he doesn't even bother to reply. Lainey stepped out of the bathroom, overhearing Nella's words. She added, recently, Alex has indeed been acting a bit strange. I wonder why he's buying so much food and drinks. And he's been booking a lot of hotel banquet tables too, as if there's a serious shortage of supplies. Lainey sat down next to Nella. At this point, Nella turned to her, curious. Lainey, do you think something really happened during this time? Alex received some news, prompting him to start collecting items. Lainey chuckled, could he be acting foolishly? If something really happened, there would surely be a notification. She then comforted Nella, let's just go on with our lives. If he really enjoys collecting things, then that's just a joke for others. Nella found her reasoning logical. She closed her eyes, savoring the moment. A week later, Alex held the weapon in his hand. He gripped the assault rifle, examining it closely. It's finally here, he said. Though it was pricey, it's worth it. With this, I can feel much more secure even in the face of the apocalypse. Later, Alex returned to inspect his upgraded home. He looked around with satisfaction, thinking that his security company truly lived up to its reputation as the top in the country. The quality and speed of the safe room renovation were beyond reproach. A bespectacled man spoke about the newly renovated room to Alex. We've followed your specifications, he said. We've reinforced the entire room with 200 mm thick alloy, installed a military-grade ventilation system that filters out all harmful air to prevent attacks from toxic gases. Additionally, we've completely replaced the heating system with professional-grade materials from the Scientific Research Institute. Besides the requirement to renovate the heating furnace inside the wall, we've also ensured that the temperature can be maintained up to 99 degrees Celsius. The two stepped out onto the balcony, and the man continued. The window frames are all bulletproof and even blast-resistant, stronger than standard alloys, and convenient for observation outside. Finally, he smiled contentedly, concluding, furthermore, to protect your safety, we've installed a surveillance system throughout the entire building. There are a total of 300 cameras, allowing you to monitor every floor of the building. Alex was pleased. He shook hands with the employee, who grinned and said, we aim to please. I'm very satisfied with this renovated safe room, Alex said. The bespectacled man smiled back. Thank you for your feedback. I believe your experience using this place won't disappoint you. He then handed Alex the payment slip, saying, if there are no further issues, please settle the remaining amount with us over the next 3 months. Alex took it confidently, replying, of course. Then, the man turned away. Alex smirked, silently contemplating that he might not be able to pay the remaining amount when doomsday arrives. Whether they would even survive remained uncertain. He leaned against the balcony, looking down cheerfully. Finally, the last supplies are here, he thought. Below, a truck awaited, filled with water barrels. Alex believed the most essential and scarce item for survival in a global freeze would be mineral water. He descended downstairs, prompting confusion among the others. Is Alex going mad? They whispered. Just a few days ago, he was busy renovating his room, and now he's buying so much mineral water. Surely, he doesn't think the end is near. Andrew, too, was puzzled. He turned to Alex and asked, "Young Truong, why are you buying so much mineral water? If you need any help, just let me know, I'll lend a hand." Alex smiled and recalled a time before Doomsday when Andrew had selflessly shared his last meal with a starving mother and child, ultimately sacrificing himself for their sake. It was one of the few instances of genuine kindness he had witnessed in his past life. Then, Alex whispered into Andrew's ear, "This year's temperature change is a bit unusual. I've received news that this winter will be extremely harsh. It's best to prepare some food and drinks to avoid price hikes later on." Andrew, still skeptical, placed his hand on his chin and asked if it was true and whether the news was reliable. Alex placed his hand on his own body and continued, "You see, I'm preparing so much, you can also stock up on instant noodles and mineral water. These items won't hurt to have in abundance." Andrew found his reasoning sound and responded positively. He reasoned that even if he was alone in stocking up, it wouldn't hurt. Suddenly, an old man approached and advised Andrew, "Don't trust him, lately, he seems a bit mad." Alex stood with his arms crossed, indicating that he had already given his warning, and whether they believed it or not was up to them. Afterward, Alex decided that the remaining time would be spent using up the money to buy supplies. With only 3 days left before Doomsday, he planned to steal all the items from the supermarket's warehouse. This way, even if the food disappeared from the warehouse, suspicions wouldn't immediately arise. Then, he added sleeping pills to several cups of tea while pretending to prepare them. Then, he brought the tea to the table and announced, "Everyone must be tired now. Let's take a break and have a sip of this tea." Hearing this, everyone abandoned their work and gathered around to drink the tea. After seeing all my colleagues fast asleep, Alex confidently walked into the warehouse. He then stretched his arms toward the items, gathering them all into one space. After 2 hours, the once-packed Walmart supermarket was now an empty warehouse. Once he finished these tasks, Alex returned to the meeting room, holding a cup of drugged water. He then lay down on the sofa next to it, pretending to have taken the sleeping pills. An hour later, a warehouse employee gently woke him up. When Alex finally woke up, he immediately asked for a report on the warehouse situation from the employee. Alex pretended to be more concerned than anyone else. At this moment, the company's leader called him, asking what was happening. However, Alex, without any sign of panic, fabricated a nonsensical story, deceiving them a little. When the end of the world arrived in 3 days, there would be nothing to worry about. Unexpectedly, not only did the leader not believe him, but I also suspected him. Fortunately, Alex had prepared early in the morning. There were plenty of supplies in our supermarket. In just 2 hours, everything had been taken away. The manager thought what Alex said made sense, so he didn't ask any more questions. Then, he hung up and reported. I could see my subordinates looking worried and scared. Alex quickly comforted him. The higher-ups have called the police to handle the situation. You don't need to be afraid. Under Alex's brainwashing, the subordinates also woke up. Alex was then questioned by the police. When the police saw Alex being cooperative, they temporarily let him go, but they didn't let me run around freely. Perhaps they still had some suspicions. Alex then smiled and said there was no problem. I'm not foolish. If I were to run away now, wouldn't that be equivalent to admitting guilt? After that, Alex walked down the street. I saw the news agencies and major media outlets reporting on it. Someone had stolen goods from the Walmart supermarket. Then I took out my phone and checked the date. It's hard to admit that. There are only 2 days left now. Suddenly, a snowflake fell on his phone screen. Waiting for him to look up, unexpectedly, just a second ago, the sky was still blue. The next second, snow began to fall heavily. The people around also started to talk about it. Why is the weather so cold this year? And it's actually much colder than in previous years. Amidst the chaos on the streets, only Alex remained calm because only he knew best. It would take 2 days for the world to freeze. By then, Earth would collide with another planet, causing global repercussions and sudden temperature changes, leading to a worldwide ice age. Alex sat quietly at home, observing. Outside, snow was falling heavily. He took a sip of water from his cup, and it was clear that what was supposed to happen eventually had arrived. At that moment, his mobile phone on the table suddenly rang. He casually walked over, picked up the phone, and checked the message. It turned out to be from that bitch Celina and her neighbors. I was pleased to see that today the snow was falling heavily. Celina was even more excited in the group. I looked at the message on the phone and smiled softly. I hope you'll still be happy tomorrow like this. The thick snow will continue to fall for at least 3 months. The temperature will continue to drop to -6 or 7 degrees Celsius. By then, you won't have a supply, food, or safety. Can you still be in such a good mood to enjoy the snow? Indeed, early the next morning, as the neighbors opened their doors, I saw heaps of snow in front of my house. The temperature kept dropping continuously by a few degrees. It was so cold that I couldn't even die from the blissful death of yesterday. I wanted to find some thick clothes in the closet to keep warm, and I had prepared heating equipment in advance. At that moment, the mobile phone suddenly rang. It turned out to be a call from the wicked woman Celina. Startled, I angrily asked, "Why are you calling me so early in the morning?" Hearing Alex's cold tone, Celina was initially taken aback. But now she only had to suppress her anger. Then she pretended to have a subtle tone. "It's too cold outside today. You have stocked up on supplies before. Did you know beforehand that the temperature would drop significantly?" I immediately walked to the window. "Look outside at the world," I urged. Then I sighed lazily. I heard this from a friend, but I didn't expect it. But the next second, Celina's scolding came through from the other end of the phone, with a hint of anger. "Alex, you clearly knew there would be a disaster. Why didn't you tell me beforehand?" Celina immediately changed her expression again, using a sweet voice to speak to me. "Alex, it's very cold by my side. Can you let me into your room?" I chuckled as soon as I heard this. Thinking about this wicked person, who could change her attitude at any moment. If you didn't become an actor, it would be a pity. Betrayed by her in my previous life, now it's her turn to wait patiently for her death. Then I hung up without saying anything. Celina immediately panicked when she saw this. "Why isn't this miserable person pursuing me lately? Today it's too cold and I haven't prepared anything. If you can't help, then you have to find a way yourself. Only by deceiving materials from others." After Celina woke me up, I didn't want to continue sleeping. So I planned to go to the bathroom first, take a comfortable hot bath, and then take out the beef and red wine from the secret space. Let's have breakfast first. Then let's look at what's happening outside now. I saw the news anchor looking flustered, talking about last night, a strong cold air attacking the world, leading to the current global temperature. Overall, the weather had become much colder. It was advisable to stay warm during these days and avoid going outside. After hearing the hostess's words, Alex wasn't overly surprised. Because the level of disaster was not much different from his previous life. Right at that moment, the mobile phone next to him rang again. It turned out to be another message from Celina, asking him to send her something to eat. Unexpectedly, this bitch wasn't stupid either. The things Alex could eat so far were extremely precious to him. It was regrettable that he had experienced his previous life. He was no longer the trusting person he used to be. In this life, he would tease her well, then let her die miserably due to endless despair. Afterward, Alex took a picture of the steak on the table. Celina's face was filled with joy after seeing the photo I sent. As she predicted, Alex had a supply of edible food. But when she realized that what he was eating was high-quality beef and premium wine, Celina immediately became jealous. Clearly, everyone lived in the same building. Why could Alex live so well? Then she immediately sent another message to Alex. "Alex, you're handsome. Your food looks delicious. I also want to eat steak and red wine." Unexpectedly, Alex just casually replied that if she wanted to eat, she could go to the supermarket and buy it herself. Celina was extremely angry, wanting to curse at me. But she soon realized she had to suppress her anger. If anger tarnished her image, she wouldn't be able to deceive Alex. I noticed Celina had stopped sending messages. Then Alex threw the phone onto the sofa and picked up the fork. "Get ready to continue enjoying your breakfast," he said. I also found the laptop on the table. I wanted to see if there were any interesting programs coming up on Earth and check the installed cameras. I saw Neighborhood Commissioner Lamdan standing alone in the crowd. She sent a message to all the property owners, asking them not to worry. It was just a sudden small drop in temperature, lasting at most 2 or 3 days. She hoped everyone would remain calm and not rush to grab supplies. Some people objected, saying the snow was too thick. Who knows when it will stop? If you don't stock up now, we'll all freeze to death and starve. Seeing everyone in turmoil, Lambda advised them not to panic about the extreme weather, as it would only last for 2 or 3 days. She suggested waiting for the neighborhood committee to come up with ways to help everyone through the snowstorm. However, the residents of the apartment building protested against her words. They argued that if they didn't go out to buy some food, the prices of groceries would skyrocket. Lamdan tried to stop the crowd and warned that panic buying would only drive prices higher. She even threatened to report anyone hoarding supplies to the authorities. Just then, Alex approached Lamdan calmly and asked how long the snowstorm would last. If the extreme weather persisted for a long time, who would be responsible when everyone ran out of food and essentials? Some people in the crowd agreed with his concerns, demanding that Lamdan provide them with food. Feeling uneasy, Lamdan hurriedly reassured everyone, saying that the neighborhood committee would take responsibility for the situation. She assured them that supplies wouldn't run out, and the snowstorm would pass quickly. However, deep down, Lamdan couldn't stop cursing Alex. He blamed Alex for causing chaos among the residents and wished he could lock him up somewhere dark once the snowstorm ended. Meanwhile, Alex sat comfortably on the sofa, playing games and snacking on instant noodles. Life seemed more comfortable than before the apocalypse. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a message. Curious, he checked the neighborhood group chat, where Lamdan had tagged him with a message, warning that the snow had blocked all the roads outside. As Alex pondered over Lamdan's deliberate tagging of his name in the group chat, he continued eating ice cream. He realized Lamdan's intention was to provoke him into going outside for revenge. Without hesitation, he responded to Lamdan's message, claiming that those on the first floor were now buried under the snowstorm, which would last for at least 3 more months. He pointed out that clearing the snow wouldn't be faster than the snow falling, and going outside in such freezing weather would turn them into ice before long. Even if they cleared the snow, they would have to wait for it to stop falling. Lamdan trembled as he read the message, then quickly handed the phone back to the heater to warm his hands. Others in the group chat also chimed in, mentioning how cold it was outside, nearing -70 degrees. Lamdan felt a surge of anger at their responses, feeling powerless as no one dared to speak out earlier. Now, everyone seemed to be eager to express their opinion. Lamdan furiously tapped on the screen, responding to everyone. She questioned their attitudes, arguing that clearing the snow wasn't just for their own sake but for the community's well-being. She emphasized that as a member of the neighborhood committee, he had the authority to order Alex to clear the snow. It was a moment of crisis where they needed to unite. Anyone who dared to lead the opposition would be seen as defying the neighborhood committee's leadership and would face consequences after the snowstorm ended. Alex couldn't help but admire Lamdan's shamelessness and abuse of power. He constantly relied on the authority of the neighborhood committee to issue orders. Today, he decided he would thoroughly expose Lamdan's true face. He continued to message back in the group, asserting that if it was for the sake of the people, then the neighborhood committee members should lead the snow-clearing efforts. Moreover, with so many people in the small community, why were only a few individuals being called upon? Are we easy to bully? I don't see her calling the gangsters and rich kids. What's up, are you afraid of them? Some others chimed in with Alex, saying, that's right, always picking on the honest ones. Why not go find Gideon and Fian instead? Lamdan was sweating profusely in this situation. Everyone in the area knew that Gideon on the 6th floor had hundreds of people under him, and that rich kid also had connections to higher-ups. Truong Dinh chuckled confidently and replied, if Lamdan's so courageous, why not go call Gideon and Fian down to shovel snow? Alex secretly thought to himself that in his past life, the first person to use a hammer to knock on his door was Gideon. Alex smirked as he poured himself a drink, saying that none of them were good people anyway. If I've made you all detest me so much, then I'll make sure to retaliate against you all. At this point, Lamdan became furious, standing up and muttering curses under her breath. Alex panicked, realizing why Lamdan was singling out Gideon. Clearly, she didn't want to draw attention from them. If I don't do this, who will respect me in the future? Meanwhile, elsewhere, Gideon was lounging on the sofa when suddenly his phone rang, prompting him to check it. Damn, this cold weather is killing even the ghosts. Who's got time to look for a job in this weather? In the group chat, Lamdan reminded everyone in the neighborhood. Anyone who has free time, please bring your tools to help shovel snow. Don't forget to mention Gideon and Fian. Upon hearing this, Gideon immediately recorded a harsh message to send to the group, saying that in this freezing weather, Lamdan's head would be the first thing he shoveled. If you're sick, go to the hospital checked. If you bother me again, I'll chop you up. Fian, also laughing cynically, recorded a message while hugging his beautiful girlfriend. What does shoveling snow have to do with me? I don't need to work all day, I can just stay at home and sleep comfortably. After sending the message to the group, Fian, with his arm around his girlfriend, remarked, "What a stupid dog, always using its master's money to work. If I have money, why should I bother working? If you want to shovel, then shovel quickly. You all still have to hurry up and go out to earn your daily bread." He didn't forget to take a picture of himself and his girlfriend. Seeing the messages from Gideon and Fian, Lamdan became furious, blaming Alex for everything. Alex, casually frying chicken in the kitchen, received a scolding message from Lamdan. "Are you trying to pick a fight with me, you brat?" Alex calmly took out the fried chicken and placed it on a plate on the table, disdainfully replying to Lamdan, "Stop harassing the weak and fearing the strong. You get scolded by others and then come looking for me to bully for a thrill." As he spoke, his expression changed, immediately threatening Lamdan. "Let me tell you, I'm not easy to bully. If you dare to bark like a rabid dog, be careful of your life." His words carried a sense of menace, causing Lamdan to sit back down, still muttering curses. "You despicable nerve-wracking brat, just wait and see what I'll do to you." Meanwhile, Alex was leisurely eating his chicken when suddenly Gideon banged on the door, demanding to confront him. "Alex, get your ass out here, why were you so aggressive earlier?" Alex calmly approached the door. "Come out here, let's have a chat about how I'm going to deal with you." Seeing no response, Gideon became enraged and threatened, "I'm going to break down this door and drag you out, just wait and see." As he continued to pound on the door, Alex quietly approached with his own weapon in hand. Opening a small window, he aimed at Gideon's head with his weapon raised. Alex raised his weapon. He squinted one eye to look down at Gideon's legs. No need to kill this guy right now, it'd be too easy and boring. Gideon didn't know what misfortune was about to befall him. He stood at the door of Alex's room, holding a wooden stick. Seeing Alex not coming out, he shouted loudly, "Are you hiding inside like a coward, not daring to come out? If I can get in there, you're dead for sure," he threatened. Alex quickly shot an arrow that pierced through the guy's leg. Gideon, standing unsteadily, dropped the wooden stick, yelling out in pain as he held the leg that had just been pierced. Alex, looking from inside, saw Gideon clutching his own injured leg in agony, feeling satisfied with the effectiveness of his action. "Direct penetration is excellent," he said, lifting his spear onto his shoulder. "With the temperature below 70 degrees and a puncture wound like that, that leg is as good as useless." Alex had already left by now, leaving behind a trail of blood, realizing that if not promptly treated in the scarcity of medical supplies, infection was inevitable. He would then die in pain and cold. His face looked terrible. He then entered the elevator, leaning against the wall, sweating profusely. He said that the guy really meant it, just now, he wanted to kill him. As the elevator door opened, he stepped out, taking out his phone, urgently seeking medical attention as the wound was already starting to freeze over. He called the hospital, but the result was an apology, saying the number you dialed could not be reached at the moment. Please try again later. He cursed the weather and the fact that even if the hospital were still operating, the ambulance couldn't get through. He went back inside, searching again for something to alleviate his injury. He looked serious, saying, "It's too late, I'll have to self-treat and save the leg." Gideon sat on the sofa, one hand holding his leg and the other holding scissors to remove the arrow stuck in his wound, which seemed to have already frozen stiff. He said relievedly, "It's fortunate that it froze, I won't need a tetanus shot." He pulled out a piece of cloth and tossed the bloody arrow onto the floor. He put his hand on his forehead, then said, "Alex, I'll definitely kill you." Gideon picked up his phone and entered the group chat of the apartment complex, addressing Alex in a message, "You wait. If I don't kill you now, my subordinate, Gideon, will make sure you regret it." Alex, unafraid, replied, "What are you, daring to challenge me again? I'll cripple your other leg if you dare to mess with me again." Lamdan and Nella, after reading the exchange, were both surprised and shared the same question: how could Alex dare to confront Gideon like this? It seemed that even with his injured leg, Gideon's subordinates had also seen the message and angrily called him. "Boss, do you have any orders?" Gideon, fuming, quickly ordered them to sweep the entire area for him. "Anyone who can fight, go out and find that damn dog. We must kill him today," he commanded. Although the weather outside was harsh, Gideon's men quickly gathered. At his home, he had all types of weapons ready. He addressed the group, "Let's go. That troublemaker dared to touch one of ours. He's had enough of living." Gideon pointed in the direction of the group and spoke loudly, "My leg is about to be shot by Alex with an arrow. That dog lives in room 2401. Be careful not to let him ambush successfully. If you can kick down the door, then kill that coward for me." Upon hearing this, the others quickly approached Alex's location, pounding on the door with loud, tooth-rattling thuds. The leader, holding a long and menacing knife, yelled out, "Open the door, daring to shoot our hero. Today is your last day. Next year on this day will be your death anniversary. The snowstorm has blocked the roads, and it took a lot of effort for us to get here. Now calling for help is useless." After speaking, he forcefully stabbed the door with his knife, causing the blade to separate from the handle and fly towards the head of a blonde-haired man. He looked terrified, his face dripping with sweat, and they were puzzled and somewhat worried. "This door is made of pure metal and is so thick. How do we break it down?" Though somewhat intimidated, he didn't forget to mock Alex, saying how many enemies he must provoke to build a door thicker than the city wall. From inside, Alex could observe them using force to break down the door. He sighed irritably, saying, "Oh well, let's start again." He looked at the people outside through his tablet and sarcastically commented on their lack of strength, asking why they hadn't eaten yet. The leader, holding another knife, raised it towards Alex and loudly challenged, "If you have the guts, come out of your shell." Hearing this, Alex walked to the bathtub, grabbed a long hose, and filled it with water. He said in a loud voice, "Let me calm you all down for free." After finishing, Alex pointed the hose towards the noisy group outside, and one of them came forward. Despite feeling a bit surprised and worried, they thought it was a trick Alex had used on Gideon and decided to confront it. Just as they were about to finish their sentence, Alex sprayed a stream of cold water at them, causing them to shiver and cry out, begging him to stop. After Alex stopped, they staggered away, trembling and shouting for help. Some lay on the floor, unable to move, while others wrapped themselves in a bundle, holding their legs. Alex sat on the sofa, humming a tune, observing them, and silently thought that although he wanted to use his bow to discipline them, spraying water was more effective and guaranteed. As they shuffled back to Gideon's room, some without clothes, Gideon asked where that dog was and if they had brought it back. Seeing them silent, he got angry and demanded an explanation of what had happened. The guy in the middle, trembling, stammered a response, saying that Alex was too arrogant. The door wasn't that thick, and they had been banging on it all day. Then he added that Alex had sprayed them with water, making them too cold to bear. Gideon, hearing this, thought to himself that although the door of that dog's house seemed as thick as a turtle shell, he was still angry and bent his fingers, saying in a threatening tone, "No problem. After all, even an iron turtle has its vulnerabilities. I don't believe it can stay indoors forever," he muttered to himself as he rummaged through his mind, then discarded the thought into the trash can and pondered. It seemed that he had become aware of human capabilities. Basically, one couldn't confront natural disasters like this. He sat down on the sofa, turned on the TV, and listened to the news. Currently, we turn our attention where the authorities are planning to command us to launch the final offensive against this snowstorm. According to reports from the United States, due to ineffective snowstorm prevention, 200 million people have been affected, with over 1 million fatalities. Let's not panic and trust in the government's strength, Alex turned off the TV, yawned, and thought about the scale and duration of this snowstorm. Basically, it couldn't be calculated by normal theories. The outside world was still too optimistic. He picked up his phone and saw a message from Mrs. Lamdan, expressing concern and advising everyone to watch the news. "Our country has the strength and resources to combat this snowstorm," she wrote. "Don't be tense. All problems will be solved. If anyone needs supplies, please try your best to help. In the end, this snowstorm will pass quickly." "No need to worry." Alex finished reading the message, then received another inquiry from Nella. "Alex, are you okay?" she asked. Alex chuckled to himself and replied, confirming that he was still alive. "I'm fine," he responded briefly. "My house is out of food. I remember you bought a lot of groceries. Can you spare some for me? If you come back, I'll invite you to dinner," Nella continued. He lifted his phone and took a picture of the food on the table, a large and red shrimp, and sent it to Nella with a message, "Want to invite me for dinner? Unfortunately, I've already eaten." Upon receiving the message from Alex, Nella's face turned sour. "This guy was supposed to be my backup plan, but now his priority is pushed back, and he's behind someone else," she muttered, feeling annoyed. Her friend sitting beside her had read the entire message and commented, "Well, you don't see any virtue in him. This kind of man deserves to be single for life." Seemingly upset, Lainey took out her phone and turned to another corner to send a message to Alex. Her first message criticized him, asking, "Why are you being so stupid? Nella isn't happy now. Do you realize how important this matter is?" Alex chuckled inwardly, thinking, one sings white-faced, one sings red-faced. Quite a drama, and sent the message. Lainey laughed and messaged Alex again, saying, "The snowstorm could last a few days. Can you endure hunger for 2 meals until then? Even this bit of food, you're not willing to share," she added. "I can see that you're not sincere towards Nella at all." Alex took a sip of soda, smirked, and said condescendingly, "Bitch and fuck girl, what a fascinating combination. Talking for half a day, and this is the attitude? What are you up to, Nella?" She glanced at Nella, who looked back at him in confusion. Nella showed a disappointed expression. She closed her eyes uncomfortably and said, "Who is Alex? I don't know him. Please don't mention him in front of me anymore." Seeing her friend's reaction, Lainey leaned in and suggested, "Alex seems a bit clueless. Maybe you has other boyfriend? We can't go out now, so let's ask him to help with the work first." Nella let out a sigh before deciding to make a phone call. She dialed a number and spoke gently to the person on the other end. "Hi, Chugab. I have a small favor to ask you." Not long after, a tall guy with red hair, Chugab, approached Nella and handed her something, saying, "Nella, I've brought what you asked for. Although these are discounted items from the warehouse, I've picked out the best and most valuable ones." Nella looked at him, feeling a bit embarrassed, and said, "Thank you, Chugab. You're really kind." Chugab replied, "No worries, Nella. I can handle anything." After he left, Nella's friend brought the food in and closed the door. At this moment, Nella's expression changed drastically. She was both angry and disdainful, thinking to herself, "This guy, Chugab, who does he think he is, trying to have intentions with me? He's just like a dog cub." 3 days later, as darkness fell, Alex held a chicken thigh in one hand, chewing it while holding his phone in the other. He said, "The time is coming, and the drama is about to begin." Suddenly, the power went out, causing panic and chaos among the residents. "Why did the power go out?" someone asked anxiously, as everyone wrapped themselves in blankets or thick coats and stepped out of their houses. A girl asked if anyone had electricity, while a young mother held her small child, worrying about the lack of hot water to mix milk for her baby. A man, wiping his glasses, said, "With such cold weather, the air conditioner is completely useless. We can't even use it. What about the heater? How are we going to survive?" Others wondered aloud. Alex, seeming unconcerned, said, "In such situations, principles don't matter anymore. We're all surrounded by darkness and snow, except for where I am." Mrs. Lamb wrapped herself and her grandson shakily, saying, "It's okay. How could it suddenly become like this? Just a few days ago, everything was fine." Then, she received a message from the neighborhood committee's chat group. The message stated that this global snowstorm is likely to be a once-in-a-millennium event. Perhaps we'll welcome a catastrophe. Perhaps we will welcome a catastrophic extinction event, which is essentially an apocalypse. With over 1 billion people, we simply can't take care of some of the key cities in the country anymore. They've all collapsed, the message read. Next, if we want to survive, we can only rely on ourselves. We must stockpile necessities, especially food and energy for heating. Mrs. Lambdan read the message and said, "That's right. We need supplies, especially now while others are still unaware of this news." Turning to her grandson, she asked, "Dear, when will your parents be back with conditions like this outside?" The boy reassured her, "It's okay, Grandma. They'll be back soon." Mrs. Lambdan thought to herself that she must protect her 2 grandchildren and ensure their survival. She then sent a message to everyone in the neighborhood. In the community, accidents were just temporary. Repair work for water and electricity had already begun. The neighborhood committee would take over management if the residents couldn't cooperate effectively. They would request the police to arrest and investigate anyone spreading alarming messages. What's happening outside now? Hung Hao, lying on his bed, saw the message and threw his phone aside, feeling exhausted. Gideon, surrounded by his subordinates, each wrapped in a blanket, read the message angrily. This old man relies on his authority and gives orders without solving anything. "He orders us around here," one of his subordinates said, red-faced with anger. "Gideon, we can't go outside anymore. We don't even have fever-reducing medicine. We have to endure until now," Gideon scolded his subordinates, still useless as ever. Alex, instead of being killed, was subdued completely. Alex was playing video games when he received a message from Mrs. Lambdan. Finding it strange, he checked it and saw that Mrs. Lambdan was informing everyone about the significant impact of the snowstorm on their lives. According to the official announcement, the snowstorm would last for a short while longer. To help everyone overcome the difficulties, the neighborhood committee would collect supplies from each household and distribute them accordingly. After reading the message, Alex smirked and remarked, "Same old tricks. Just like before." Just as he exited the chat, messages from Mrs. Lambdan kept flooding in. Alex wondered who couldn't be deceived and was targeting him next. Mrs. Lambdan messaged him directly. "Alex, you work near the warehouse, right? There must be some food and drinks inside. I remember you bought 3 large carts last time," Mrs. Lambdan messaged. Alex's face darkened with anger as he replied, "In my previous life, you deceived everyone with supplies. I had good intentions, but in the end, you let the wolf into the house." Mrs. Lambdan continued messaging, "Now, everyone is facing difficulties. It's time for you to step up. Don't worry, once this snowstorm is over, we'll definitely repay you. Everyone will remember your kindness." Seeing Mrs. Lambdan's overly enthusiastic messages, Alex sneered cynically. "That's great then, Mrs. Lambdan. If you happen to get some supplies, remember to share some with me," he replied sarcastically. Alex thought to himself, "In my previous life, I was brutally killed. Even now, he will not." Enraged, Mrs. Lambdan exclaimed, "Normally, when working in the warehouse, you've taken plenty of discounted items. You must be a lot." She then turned to her grandson, gently patting his head, and reassured herself to remain calm. She couldn't give up. If she could deceive Alex, they would surely have plenty of supplies, at least enough to survive for another week. Picking up the phone, Mrs. Lambdan spoke in a soft, coaxing tone, "Alex, everyone knows you manage the warehouse of the supermarket. How could your house be lacking food and drinks? This time, the command from the organization requires you to comply and contribute to everyone, and both individuals and organizations will remember your contribution. Listen, move all the food in the house to distribute to everyone," Alex said as he brushed his teeth and responded to Mrs. Lambdan. "I truly didn't deceive you. All the food in my house has been eaten up, and since the beginning of the year, I doesn't have any surplus food anymore," Alex replied. "Or maybe you could give me a few packs of instant noodles first to kickstart for everyone," Alex suggested. Mrs. Lambdan seemed to lose her patience and angrily yelled at Alex, "You're not allowed to talk to me like that anymore. Now, I'm representing the organization. If you refuse to provide supplies, it's tantamount to opposing the organization, Mrs. Lambdan warned. But Alex heard that with a sneer, then retorted to the old lady, just representing the neighborhood committee, nothing more. Don't even mention being a civil servant, you're not even on the payroll, he taunted Mrs. Lambdan, your usual arrogance is enough, now you're deluding yourself, huh? If you've got the guts, show it, Alex challenged. Mrs. Lambdan was too angry to respond further. Alex hung up the phone, then Lambdan loudly shouted, you're incorrigible. There's no way to educate you, you're either good or bad. Alex continued, observing Mrs. Lambdan's house while holding a steaming bowl of noodles. Everyone is bringing supplies to her, he noticed. He raised the bowl of noodles, pondering that the most abundant supply in their house could only last for 3 or 4 days. Plus, low temperatures would deplete it rapidly, but if they voluntarily bit the hook, it had nothing to do with him. Alex looked out at the snowy atmosphere outside and affirmed to yourself that chaos had descended outside. Only with new supplies could one survive, otherwise, it was just a waiting game for death. Mrs. Lambdan's mobile phone received a message from the neighborhood committee group, one person messaging, Mrs. Lambdan, you said after obtaining supplies, they would be evenly distributed. All the food in my house has been eaten up, it's been 2 days. Please let us take some. Another person added, that's right, you promised equal distribution so everyone has food to eat. Wrapped in a blanket with her grandson, Mrs. Lambdan sat on the chair and scoffed, all these things are mine already. Getting supplies was a struggle for me, why would I let you take them? The phone on Mrs. Lambdan's table rang, and her grandson hastily said, Grandma, the phone. She glanced at the phone and asked sarcastically, now you all realize, huh? Then she picked up the phone and looked at it, alarmed to see that the caller was Gideon. Worried about his intentions, Lambdan answered the call. Gideon began teasingly, hello, Mrs. Lambdan, you truly have the courage to take everyone's supplies into your own hands. Mrs. Lambdan coughed twice and replied with a righteous tone, I'm the committee member responsible for managing everyone's supplies. It's my duty. Gideon, upon hearing this, sounded amused. Well, that's great. Now our house is lacking supplies. Please deliver them to my house. Mrs. Lambdan refused, saying, but I need to inventory and process these supplies. Besides, there are still a few people who haven't delivered their supplies, so we haven't divided them yet. Her grandson chewed on a piece of bread, listening attentively. Gideon, enraged, accused Mrs. Lambdan of taking those items for her own use, didn't she? Beside him were his followers ready for combat any time. He continued assertively, listen carefully, obediently hand over the supplies to me, or else me and my 10+ men will personally come to your house. Those who were once defeated and demoralized were now revitalized, resembling bloodthirsty demons. Gideon spoke swiftly and acted swiftly. It didn't take long for him to lead a group of menacing individuals to Mrs. Lambdan's room, opening the door and entering. Lambdan felt terrified and shouted, you can't come in. This is illegal trespassing. Gideon approached her and delivered a powerful slap to her face, accusing her of deceiving neighbors for their supplies. This is justice being served, he declared. Meanwhile, Alex, eating sausages while observing the scene at Mrs. Lambdan's house, remarked, they've started fighting each other. Then, suddenly, he had a brilliant idea, sending this scene to the residential chat group so everyone could witness it. He chuckled gleefully, then tapped something on his phone and said, the reactions from those people will surely be remarkable. At this point, Mrs. Lambdan collapsed from the impact of the slap. Gideon's associates, armed, also entered the house. Gideon pointed and immediately ordered, search this room thoroughly. Take all the food and drinks. These are the hard-earned contributions of our neighbors, not for her to take advantage of. Despite her bruised face, Mrs. Lambdan tried to crawl towards Gideon, clutching his leg, and begged tearfully, you can't take away the food. Among them are provisions we've stored ourselves. If you take everything, how will my grandson and I survive? Gideon looked down coldly at the woman, then uncomfortably replied, what does that have to do with me? Mrs. Lambdan, still holding onto his leg tightly, continued to sob and plead for mercy. Give us a way to survive, pleaded Mrs. Lambdan. Gideon felt no pity for the old woman, instead, he despised her. He kicked her with his foot and cursed, get out of here. Mrs. Lambdan collapsed on the floor, her face covered in wounds. Her grandchild, pale and shocked, stood watching his grandmother. Enraged at the assault, her grandchild grabbed a small knife, her face full of resentment, and screamed, "Get out, all of you." The thugs retreated as Mrs. Lambden's grandson stabbed one of them with the knife. The man trembled, sweat pouring down his face, and turned back with teary eyes, one hand clutching his wounded buttock and the other trembling as he shouted, "You want to die, huh?" He then kicked Lambden's grandson hard, causing him to fall. The others stood by, mocking and laughing at the sight. Mrs. Lambden approached her unconscious grandson, trembling hands reaching out to touch him, and sobbed, "Are you okay?" Gideon, seeing this, turned away disdainfully. "From the old to the young, none of them are any good," he muttered. He and his gang hoisted the stolen supplies onto their shoulders and declared, "This is the price for deceiving neighbors. I'm just enforcing justice." Alex recorded the encounter between Lambden and Gideon and sent it to the group chat, where someone responded with laughter. "Deception deserves punishment," Liney wrote, praising Gideon as a hero. Another message suggested dealing with people like Mrs. Lambden harshly, prompting Alex to realize that these people were oblivious to the root of the problem. Someone else expressed concern, warning Gideon to be careful because Mrs. Lambden might report him to the police. Alex lowered his head solemnly and said seriously, "Today, he may raid Mrs. Lambden's house to plunder. Sooner or later, he'll come after your houses too." After his statement, he returned to his usual demeanor, spreading his hands and adding, "But unfortunately, it has nothing to do with me." Suddenly, Mrs. Lambden messaged the group, pleading for help, "Does anyone have hemostatic medicine, antibiotics, and antiseptic? My grandson was injured by Gideon. Dr. Mia needs these emergency medications." Alex was surprised and wondered if this doctor was Mia. Was she planning to operate on Lambden's grandson? Mia was a captivating girl with long purple hair and pink eyes, known for her medical skills. Mia reassured the group that she had temporarily stopped Lambden's grandson bleeding but emphasized that it was only temporary. She offered her assistance to anyone in need of medical attention. Alex chuckled as he read the messages, contemplating, "She's a doctor at the hospital. In her past life, she saved many lives through her medical skills, making her one of the few good people in this neighborhood." Lambden messaged the group, pleading for medicine to save her grandson's life. Gideon saw this and taunted her, mocking her plea for help. He even sent laughing emojis, joined by others in their mockery. They argued that Dr. Mia was saving her grandson out of kindness, not because they owed her anything. They emphasized that saving a life was an act of mercy, not a moral obligation. Alex finished reading the messages, shaking his head in disbelief at how someone so cold-hearted could be so different today. He wondered how long they could endure the prolonged snowstorm outside, which had paralyzed them fundamentally. Yet, today, thanks to Lambden's plea in the residential chat group, it seemed like Mia had come like a savior. He also wondered what would happen after saving the boy. Would they be able to endure the prolonged blizzard outside? Some residents on the ground floor of the apartment building looked outside and found the weather unbearable. "How will we survive if the snow keeps burying the ground floor?" one exclaimed, their face pale and lips trembling. "The news says this is the largest snowstorm in tens of thousands of years. How will it end?" For a week, the entire world had been buried under snow, with temperatures dropping below freezing in some northern cities, where snowfall not only persisted but increased over several days. Many cities were buried, with residents unable to evacuate, trapped under layers of snow. In the apartment building's chat group, Mrs. Lambden continued her deceptive tactics. She messaged, "I am an official of the neighborhood committee. Hand over your supplies here. Failure to comply is a blatant violation of the law, and those involved will be dealt with accordingly. Hand over your supplies. Can't you see people are dying without help?" Lambden's grandson, who hadn't eaten for a long time, pleaded for help from everyone. "Please save him, he's just a child," Mrs. Lambden implored. "Does anyone have any food? My grandson and I haven't eaten for 2 days. I can sell supplies at a high price," a sympathetic girl messaged. "I still have some instant noodles at home. If you need them, I can sell them to you, but for $2,000 per pack. I'll buy everything you have for $1,000. Alex, who was eating chicken drumsticks, read the message and commented, "Oh, something interesting is about to happen. Residents of the apartment building, intrigued, asked about the $2,000 instant noodles. Am I seeing this right? One person questioned. Others expressed concern, suggesting not to inflate the prices of supplies too much. I'm a bit scared, another admitted, while some wondered if the world was coming to an end. But others remained rational, pointing out that it was just a slightly larger snowfall than usual. Winter came a bit early this year, someone remarked. It's not like we're surrounded by zombies or anything. In short, I have money to spend on supplies. If you agree to sell, message me privately, another resident concluded. If you don't agree, go somewhere else, he said, his face solemn as he looked at his phone and silently pondered. The city's transportation and equipment are all paralyzed. The situation is dire. While money can still be used, we must quickly buy supplies from the poor vendors. A girl replied to him, how could you do this? My entire family has no food. Fian smirked and replied, I'm not robbing you. I'm just willing to pay a bit more. If people agree to sell to me, that's their freedom. At this moment, she worriedly held her child with one hand and typed with the other. Please help us. My daughter is only a few months old. If I don't eat, I can't produce milk for her. Both my daughter and I will starve to death. Alex, upon seeing the message, chuckled softly, then pondered. A single mother with a 9-month-old daughter was pleading for help. When someone agreed, it was bound to be a tight grip, not letting go, becoming a leech. Yet, it was still so strange. Alex's face turned slightly serious as he remembered that in her previous life, she and her daughter had endured for so long. 10 days later, while Alex was lifting weights, the phone rang. He chuckled and wondered about the timing, knowing that by now, everyone's supplies must have run out. The two bitch couldn't contain themselves any longer, so he called the call, turning the camera towards the tempting dishes behind him, smiling. Why call me on video? I can see you're all getting thinner. Congratulations, congratulations. On the other end were Nella and Liney. Their saliva flowed as they shared the same thought, how does he still have so much food? The two girls looked at the screen with wide eyes. Why does your house still have so much food? Is it from the previous stockpile? Nella asked, while Liney inquired about the warmth and the sweatiness of his place. Alex heard this and replied, yes, it's from the previous stockpile, and my place is warm because of the heater. These are just junk food, he said dismissively. I only take them out to eat when I'm too lazy to cook. They're nothing special. He raised his phone towards the blazing fire, looking somewhat uncomfortable. My house has installed wall heating, it's very warm. It's uncomfortably hot inside the room. Nella's eyes widened with admiration. She took her phone and suggested to Alex, you're really meticulous in your preparations. Can I come over to your house? Her words made Liney's face freeze and filled with confusion. Nella, on the video call, laughed brightly. We haven't seen each other for so long. I miss you. Alex felt uncomfortable and pushed the phone screen back a bit. It's so cold outside, you should rest at home. He found it disgusting. Surely, there was a problem with his head before. How else could he have pursued this type of girl for 2 years? I don't know how cold it is outside, but judging by your appearance, the temperature must be very low, he remarked. Nella felt offended by his comment. You're being too much, Alex. If you don't want to help us with food and shelter, then just leave it at that. There's no need for sarcasm. Alex smirked. So, you can't keep pretending anymore? If there's any benefit, you actively seek me, right? Haven't seen you look for wealthy people's children to do the same. But don't think I'm a fool. Alex silenced himself, not caring about their words anymore. On the contrary, he provocatively added, I'm just stating the truth, that's all. What's the point of you getting all worked up? We're not close, we're not friends. What gives you the right to demand my help? On the other end of the phone, Nella's angry curses filled the air. You despicable jerk. Alex, without hesitation, hung up the call immediately. Enraged, Nella threw her phone aside. You damn jerk. Who do you think you are to curse at me? Liney, instead of consoling, added fuel to the fire. If it weren't for Nella not holding onto him tightly before, they could be enjoying what's in his house by now, she remarked. She grabbed her own phone, her finger pressing the button. She intended to call Alex. Now he was stronger than those wealthy kids, much stronger. It was about time to reveal their true colors. Exactly. Acting all high and mighty as if they're rare commodities, Nella roared, like a wild beast. "You is bitch," Nella shouted. After a brief scuffle, they fell onto the bed, still arguing. Meanwhile, at Alex's house, he was relaxing, having dinner and wine while watching the news on TV. The official announcement from the city was being broadcasted. Due to the daily power demand, the city would implement power cuts in the afternoon for devices with high power consumption. Large power stations were temporarily shutting down. There was an electricity shortage, and everyone was urged to save energy to avoid widespread power outages. Alex took a sip of red wine and then checked the tablet on the table to assess the extent of the damage caused by the natural disaster. Eventually, even the government couldn't hide it anymore. He opened the neighborhood chat group. Everyone was discussing the situation feverishly. "Well, it looks like the rumors circulating online are true. They've already started the comprehensive power cuts," he commented. "At this point, what exactly are people outside doing? Even the water pipes in my house are frozen. I still have instant noodles at home. Does anyone want them for $5,000 per pack?" Alex sighed deeply, feeling disheartened. It was clear that the world was in a dire situation. Money was practically worthless. Despite the ongoing snowstorm, days still passed by, carrying with them a glimmer of hope. But no one wanted to die, even if it meant living in dire circumstances. An elderly woman was taking care of her sick grandson, urging him not to sleep. "Don't sleep, my child. If you leave, I'll have to talk to your parents about it," she said. Meanwhile, at a makeshift clinic, a female doctor was tending to a male patient, holding onto his legs in exchange for the necessary supplies. It seemed that they could endure a little longer. Nella and Liney, living in a relatively dilapidated environment, were not in good living conditions. Due to not being able to bathe for a long time, the two sat back to back, seemingly still resentful from the previous incident. Liney spoke up, "How do you plan to handle this? The whole world is facing the snowstorm, and no one can go outside. Apart from Alex, who else can we rely on now?" Nella thought for a moment before proposing an idea. "If we can't rely on anyone else, let's just take over Alex's room." She picked up her phone and dialed Chugab's number. "We can't rely solely on the two of us. But we shouldn't let too many people know about this." As the door opened, Nella saw Chugab enter and immediately burst into tears, complaining bitterly. "Alex is such a bully, taking advantage of people excessively. He has good food and drinks at his house and even deliberately humiliates me, wanting me to go there and sleep with him." Chugab, upon hearing this, became immediately furious. "What?" He clenched his fists tightly, seething with anger. "Alex is truly despicable. He dares to do this to you. Now, I won't kill him, but he won't get away with it either." Nella's eyes filled with affection and intimacy as she embraced Chugab, causing him to blush. "Chugab, let's figure out how to take over his room, and then we can stay there together." "What do you think?" she asked. Chugab, feeling a bit flattered, replied, "Of course, dear. Don't worry, leave it to me to handle this." Nella walked away, but he made sure to be cautious. Alex is a selfish and shameless person who will surely retaliate. So, they must bring weapons to gain the upper hand. Liney, walking behind them, said decisively, "I think we should just kill him." Moments later, they arrived at Alex's apartment door. Nella had a baseball bat, while Chugab and Liney each had a kitchen knife. They nodded at each other, signaling their readiness. Chugab knocked on Alex's door and inquired, "Do you have any food?" "I'm Chugab." Alex, inside the house, looked at the security camera outside and wondered why Chugab had come to see him. If he was seeking him out, then it surely wasn't for anything good. Just then, he saw both Liney and Nella at the door, armed with weapons, which immediately raised his suspicions. "It's not okay. They want to kill me," he thought. Although he had realized their intentions, Alex still tried to call them into the apartment. Alex, all the food in my house is gone. Alex, we're colleagues. Can I exchange some fever-reducing medicine with you? Chugab said. Alex took water from the sink and poured it into a rubber hose. His eyes caught sight of a container full of wastewater and discarded food scraps. But suddenly, a brilliant idea struck Alex. Oh, fever-reducing medicine? Then let me think for a moment, he said, feigning hesitation. Chugab, still holding his knife with patience, replied calmly, I'm starving to death now. We're still colleagues. Alex stepped out of the door, lifted the mail slot cover, and inserted the rubber hose to the outside, aiming it directly at Nella, Chugab, and Liney, who were prepared to attack. As soon as he opened the door, before they could react, a stream of slimy liquid splashed onto Liney's face, causing her to scream in horror. What's this? Nella exclaimed, smelling the substance before also recoiling in disgust. It's garbage, leftovers, Alex said mockingly, watching them retch in disgust. Enraged, Chugab pounded on the door, cursing Alex. You come out here, I'll kill you, he shouted. Alex laughed from inside. Aren't you hungry? Here, have some leftover rice soup. Thank me later, he taunted. The three of them were stunned. Wait for me, I'll come in. If I don't kill you, I'm not human, Chugab threatened, repeatedly stabbing the door. But as soon as his hand touched it, an electric shock surged through him, causing him to collapse in pain. Alex watched the scene unfold with satisfaction on the security camera screen. Another fool who doesn't know when to give up. If I can't go out, then you definitely won't come in. Not even a fraction of danger will reach you, he thought. A gunshot echoed, jolting Alex awake from his dream. He sat up in bed, feeling uneasy. In the small neighborhood, someone had a gun. He reached for his tablet to check the situation on the floor above. Gideon, he hadn't died. The screen displayed Gideon and his two henchmen clearing out their belongings in the hallway of the apartment building. On the floor, there was a small basin. After cutting the basic water supply, everyone went outside to dig snow to melt for drinking water. Gideon and his cronies were waiting for this opportunity. Alex murmured to himself, carefully observing their every move. He then lay back on the bed, propped his head with his hand, and placed the tablet back on the bedside table. The person on the third floor must be dead. Their supplies were stolen and they were shot. Even if they didn't die, they won't last long, one of Gideon's lackeys asked him. Gideon, holding his phone, didn't rush. He threatened the cowardly. He instructed his lackey to send a message to the residential chat group, informing them that the snowstorm had besieged the city for so long. They couldn't rely on anyone but themselves. Starting now, he declared himself the leader of the residential area. Everything here would be decided by him. Those who disobeyed would face consequences. He flashed a smile while holding a gun in one photo and a scene of the shooting in another. Alex, brushing his teeth and checking his phone, muttered, Gideon is truly cunning. No wonder he can maneuver so freely in society. His expression darkened. Despite having many lackeys, their numbers were limited. He couldn't contend with the entire building, so he used threats and manipulation to make everyone comply, ensuring their obedience. Alex furrowed his brows, then created a new chat group named Gideon Resistance Group. They discussed how Gideon was a demon. He had shot and killed 3 families, breaking into their rooms. Those in room 301, a hot-tempered young couple, had intended to resist but were shot dead. The other families in rooms 302 and 401 were so frightened that they obediently surrendered all their food and drinks to him. They emphasized the need for unity to resist the tyranny of Gideon. Some hesitated, while the leader showed no fear, knowing that a single gun could only hold so many bullets. If they all rushed him together, he wouldn't stand a chance. They continued, this is something we can definitely handle. After all, he's just a fugitive criminal. We need to devise a long-term strategy against him and his gang of thugs. That's right. To put an end to their lawless behavior, we must use our intellect to prevail, someone said. But let's use our wits to win, not rush headlong into battle and risk getting shot. They couldn't allow Gideon to continue like this. If they did, everyone would end up dead or robbed of their supplies. Mr. Andrew added, I can lead everyone to teach these thugs a lesson. Who's with me? I support you. What weapons do you need? My family can lend you some. Gideon is a despicable character, you should sneak up behind him and stab him. Don't give him a chance, he has 5 or 6 armed men with him. I can't do it alone. I need at least a dozen young men to accompany me to ensure success. But Ms. Lam Dan, the district commissioner, had deceived them all, taking all their supplies. She warned that if they followed Mr. Andrew's plan and surrendered to Gideon, the consequences for the elderly, young, and women would be dire. The group immediately erupted into fierce debate, splitting into 2 factions, those who supported Mr. Andrew's plan and those who opposed it. The supporters argued that resistance was futile, while the opponents believed they should wait for Gideon to deal with each household individually. If they didn't unite, they would inevitably be attacked one by one. The proactive attackers were criticized for being labeled as cowards by the opposing faction, who were afraid of both life and death. The dissenters had a valid point, questioning whether Mr. Andrew was a spy infiltrating to lure them into a trap. Nevertheless, they were left to make their own decisions. If they're called cowards, then who will protect their wives and children if they rush in and get slaughtered, someone argued. After all, someone like Gideon won't last long, Alex lamented as he stirred the food, feeling helpless. I placed too much hope in them. We're already divided into factions like this. He served the food onto plates and took them to the living room, dismayed by the ongoing conflict. In another room of the apartment building, Gideon held his gun, his gang standing by. What are you waiting for? Move faster, he demanded impatiently. One of his lackeys hesitated. Gideon, maybe we should leave. There are surely still people in this building with food. It's not necessary, right? Gideon silenced him by pressing the gun to his head. Enough talking. If you want to throw away what's left, then go ahead. But remember, the dead are still in the house. Do you want to end up like them? Seeing his seriousness, the lackey quickly complied. Yes, Gideon, you're right. Those who are dead should be used to their fullest potential. Utilizing them can help us survive longer, which is a good thing, Gideon said, lowering his voice. If you understand, that's good. With his gun still in hand, he observed as his gang reluctantly followed suit, acknowledging that without weapons, they might not have obeyed his orders so readily. Only by sharing food together can people truly consider themselves on the same boat. Alex continued to eat while checking the security situation through the surveillance cameras. In this apartment building, Gideon was cruel enough to leave corpses right outside the door, most likely as preparation. If there was no food, they would use them as food. He stretched for a moment to relax his joints. The next day, there was a new message in the chat group, a person crying and pleading for help. She hoped others quickly rushed to rescue her. She was right below Gideon's apartment, where people were banging on her door. She called Mr. Andrew, begging for help, saying that he was not an ex-soldier for nothing. Those people, she was sure, couldn't fight back. They were unbelievably ruthless. Everyone needed to unite again. If something happened to her, the next one would be them. Her face was terrified as she looked out. Suddenly, the door burst open. A figure rushed in, and the girl hid behind a large sofa, crying and begging for mercy. Don't, please, spare me. All the food in my house, I'll give it to you, she pleaded, but in a blink of an eye, she was dragged outside, screaming for help. The new message kept popping up on the screen, reporting her fate. Luckily, she was the first one to die. Good timing to give everyone a little more time, Nella said, reading the message with a hint of unease. We must find a solution. We can't go on like this. Gideon and his gang could target other women. If we don't enter Alex's house, what else can we do? We'll soon end up like there, Liney asked. We'll be in the same predicament sooner or later, Nella said anxiously, biting her nails. The news in Alex's house has supplies for those who can trust each other. Then let's rob his house, Liney suggested. On Alex's side, they received another invitation to join a new chat group called Tu Doi Jup Do Now, Team Helping Each Other. Nella messaged, warning that it was very dangerous outside now. The cunning of Gideon's gang will sooner or later find us. We're separated now, and we lack a good stronghold. Your house has a balcony and sturdy doors, Nella pleaded. We hope you can join our team. Alex recorded a voice message in response. It seemed that Nella had informed them about the situation here. I don't need it. Thank you. I'm comfortable being alone now. If I want someone to stay with me, I'll find someone in a higher position, he replied, showing his insight into their calculating nature. You can't just foresee the immediate future. Only by staying together can we survive, Liney argued. Your room has a balcony convenient for collecting snow water, so that's why everyone chose your house. We all benefit, and we can protect you. Nella admitted, we begged you, I admit it. But think about it, just by letting us in, you could save 7 or 8 lives. Could you watch us being killed by Gideon? We've been neighbors and friends for so many years. Alex couldn't bear to listen to their reasoning anymore. At this point, whether I survive or not depends on my own courage. You mean nothing to me. What do you base your request on? He said before leaving abruptly. Nella was taken aback after hearing his response. Nella exclaimed angrily, indeed, he's burying his conscience. We're all acquaintances, yet he can speak without a shred of humanity. This heartless person can also express such words. Kiva, with a solemn expression, said, my cousin now agrees to let you stay here. Moreover, you all promised that you could persuade Alex to let us stay in his house. But now he simply refuses. How should we deal with this? Ticked, adjusting his glasses on his nose, spoke with a tone full of determination. With someone like him, we don't need to be polite. Anyway, he's alone in his house. Let's surround it, prepare ourselves, and break in.